In Redwater Federal Penitentiary, respect is not earned with word, it's earned with blood. That morning, when the guards called the new guy into the cage, everyone expected a massacre. But in less than 10 seconds, it was the so-called king of the yard who ended up on his knees. The yard was packed. Inmates crowded against the fences, shouting, betting, laughing. The cage, a rusted octagon built from old scrap metal, was known as the den, a place where the guards looked the other way and justice was decided by fists. The air was heavy with sweat and dust, the kind that sticks to your throat and reminds you you're trapped in hell. Inside the cage stood Cole Viper Maddox, the undisputed predator of Redwater, tall, tattooed, confident, every muscle carved from years of domination. Beside him was Eddie Razor Lee, smaller but mean, his laughter echoing like broken glass. And facing them, barefoot, silent, expressionless, was the new inmate, Elias Ward. He didn't belong there. His posture was too straight, his movements too calm. He didn't twitch, didn't flinch, didn't even blink while the others laughed. His blue uniform hung loosely on his lean frame, his hands relaxed by his sides. It was as if he wasn't seeing two men in front of him, but two mistakes waiting to happen. "Hey, old man," Razor shouted, pointing and laughing. "You even know where you are?" Viper smirked. "You sure you want to do this? In here, fear gets you hurt fast." Elias didn't answer. He just looked at them with quiet eyes, the kind of look that makes a man hesitate without knowing why. Around the cage, the noise began to fade. The inmates could feel it too, that strange pressure in the air, that stillness before something breaks. "Fine," Viper growled. "Let's end this quick." He charged first, his fists flying like hammers. Years of street fights, of broken bones and domination, all in one violent swing. But Elias moved differently. Not fast, precisely. He stepped aside, his body turning just enough for the punch to slice through empty air. Before anyone could blink, his hand caught Viper's wrist, twisted, and drove him down with a sound that cut through the chaos. A sharp crack of bone and concrete. Gasps erupted. Razor froze mid-laugh. Viper, the man who ruled Redwater, was on the floor, choking on disbelief. Elias didn't move closer. He simply stood over him, breathing slow, balanced, eyes steady. It wasn't rage. It wasn't pride. It was control, the kind that only comes from someone who's fought 100 times before, and learned to end it in one strike. Razor tried to recover the moment with a forced laugh. "Lucky hit, man. You—" He didn't finish. Elias turned his gaze toward him, not angry, but unshakable like a storm about to hit. Razor lunged anyway. In a blur, Elias ducked, his palm rising under Razor's chin with a precision so clean it looked rehearsed. Razor collapsed instantly, his body stiff before he hit the ground. Silence. For the first time in years, the den was quiet. No one laughed. No one moved. Even the guards watching from the distance pretended not to see what had just happened. Viper tried to stand. His pride was heavier than his pain, but his body refused to obey. Elias crouched down slightly, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Power without control is just weakness wearing a mask." The words hung in the air like smoke. No one dared to breathe. When Elias stood again, every eye in the yard followed him. He wasn't the rookie anymore. He was something else, something the prison hadn't seen before. From that day, whispers spread through Redwater like fire. The quiet newcomer who everyone mocked had defeated the kings of the cage, not with fury, but with absolute mastery. And while most men fought for survival, Elias Ward had just rewritten the rules of fear. Because in Redwater Penitentiary, the true danger isn't the loudest man in the yard. It's the one who never needed to speak at all. After that day in the den, nothing inside Redwater Penitentiary felt the same. The echoes of that fight still bounced between the concrete walls like a ghost no one could ignore. The guards pretended it hadn't happened. The administration buried the incident. But everyone, from the kitchen workers to the lifers in solitary, knew the balance of power had shifted. Elias Ward became a name whispered more than spoken. Some said he was ex-military, dishonorably discharged after a classified mission went wrong. Others swore he had been a martial arts instructor somewhere in Asia before disappearing off the grid. but no one could prove a thing. His file was thin, just a few pages of vague charges and sealed documents. To most inmates, that made him even more dangerous. The prison itself was a beast of steel and routine. Morning started with the blaring siren, echoing across the yard like an alarm from hell. Inmates lined up for head count under the harsh gaze of armed guards on the towers. Then came breakfast, powdered eggs, stale bread, and a side of humiliation. For most men, that routine killed the soul. But Elias didn't seem broken. He moved through it like someone who'd already served a longer sentence inside his own mind. His cell was small, cracked paint on the walls, a single bunk and a barred window that let in only slivers of light. Yet somehow, that space felt different. Other inmates said it was quiet near him, like even the noise of Redwater knew better than to get too close. Every morning before the yard opened, Elias practiced alone. Slow movements, deep breathing, quiet focus. It wasn't the aggressive training others did. It was almost meditative. His body moved with control, every motion precise and balanced as if guided by something older than instinct. Those who woke early enough to watch didn't dare interrupt. In Redwater, strength usually came from anger, but his came from stillness. Even the guards noticed. One of them, Officer Daniels, often lingered near the corridor when Elias trained. He wasn't sure why. Maybe curiosity, maybe respect. "You're not like the others," he once said quietly. Elias looked up, eyes steady. "No one is once you take the mask off." Daniels didn't ask what that meant. Some truths in Redwater weren't meant to be spoken. Meanwhile, Cole Viper Maddox kept his distance. His broken pride was worse than his bruised ribs. For years, fear had been his weapon. Now it slipped from his grasp like sand. Inmates who once followed him started questioning his strength. He tried to regain his dominance, but every time his gaze crossed Elias's, he looked away. That silence, that calm stare, was a defeat worse than pain. Eddie Razor Lee wasn't the same either. He spent weeks nursing a cracked jaw and avoiding eye contact. The laughter that once filled his days vanished, replaced by a hollow tension. He'd replay the fight in his head every night, how one movement, one strike had taken everything from him. It wasn't just about fighting anymore. It was about control. Who had it, and who had lost it. Redwater thrived on chaos, but since that day, something changed. The violence didn't stop. It never does in places built on anger. But there was hesitation. Men thought twice before starting a fight. Even the loudest ones kept their distance when Elias walked by. His silence had become a kind of authority. Not forced, not shouted, earned. Still, the peace was fragile. A prison never forgets humiliation, and men like Viper don't forgive it. Rumors spread that he was planning a rematch, something official, with money and pride on the line. Some guards were even betting on it. Everyone wanted to see if the rookie's victory was skill or luck. Elias didn't react to the whispers. He kept to himself, cleaning the corridor floors, reading old books from the library, living like a shadow. But deep down, he knew peace in a place like this never lasted. Redwater had its own rhythm, one built on violence and fear, and the storm always comes back. One night, as the lights dimmed and the yard fell silent, Elias sat on his bunk, staring at the faint light through the bars. Somewhere beyond the walls, thunder rumbled. He closed his eyes and whispered something to himself, words from a language no one else could understand. Because the truth was, Elias Ward hadn't come to Redwater by mistake. He was there for a reason, and that reason was still waiting in the dark. Days turned into weeks, but the echoes of that fight refused to fade. For the first time in years, Redwater wasn't ruled by chaos. It was ruled by uncertainty. And in a place like that, uncertainty is far more dangerous than fear. The hierarchy of the prison had cracked. Viper, once the undisputed king of the yard, now walked with his pride stitched together by anger. He avoided Elias at first, telling himself it wasn't worth it. But humiliation festers. Every whisper, every look, every mention of the rookie who took him down was a blade twisting deeper. He started training again, harder, longer, fueled by rage. The weights in the gym echoed under his fists, the sound of metal clashing like distant thunder. Next time, he told Razor one night, he won't walk out of that cage. But Redwater was more than two men. It was a web of alliances, guards, gangs, debts, and favors. When one piece shifted, everything else trembled. The Latinos who once backed Viper began leaning toward other leaders. The smaller gangs started negotiating peace, afraid to pick the wrong side. Even the guards felt it. Daniels once told the warden, "If you don't handle this soon, someone else will." The warden didn't respond. He'd seen this before. Storms always came, and sometimes it was better to let them destroy what needed breaking. Elias Ward, meanwhile, kept his silence. He worked in the laundry, folding uniforms under flickering lights, ignoring the looks and whispers around him. Some respected him, others feared him, but he never fed into either. Every night he returned to his cell, performing those same silent movements. The slow breathing, the measured balance, the meditative stillness. No one knew what he was thinking. No one dared to ask. Until one night, a new guard named Henderson, young and arrogant, decided to test him. He caught Elias cleaning the corridor alone. "You're the big man now, huh?" Henderson smirked, tapping his baton against the wall. "Heard you dropped Maddox like a sack of bricks. You think that makes you special?" Elias didn't answer. He just kept sweeping, his movements unbroken. The silence infuriated the guard. "I'm talking to you," Henderson shouted, grabbing his shoulder. Elias turned, slow, deliberate. His eyes met the guard's, calm but sharp enough to slice through arrogance. "Respect doesn't come from noise," he said softly. "You might learn that someday." For a brief second, Henderson froze. Then he laughed awkwardly and walked away. But that moment spread through the prison like wildfire. The man who humiliated the king now made a guard back off without even raising his voice. That kind of control terrified people. Meanwhile, Razor was losing himself. The defeat had stripped him of everything. His pride, his protection, his identity. He started picking fights with smaller inmates, desperate to feel strong again. But each punch he threw only reminded him of how fast he'd fallen. He blamed Elias for it. And one night, with blood on his lip and rage in his eyes, he made a choice. He went to Viper's cell. "I'll help you bring him down," Razor hissed. "But this time we don't fight clean." Viper smiled for the first time in weeks. "Good," he said, "because I'm done fighting clean." It didn't take long for the plan to form. The next fight would be accidental. The guards who ran the illegal cage matches were paid to set it up. Word spread that there would be another brawl in the den, bigger, bloodier. And this time, Elias wouldn't know what was waiting for him. But Redwater has its own rhythm, its own way of exposing secrets. That same night, Officer Daniels found a file in the archives, one that shouldn't have existed. It was marked Confidential, Federal Records, Elias Ward. Inside it mentioned military operations, deep cover missions, and a classified program shut down over a decade ago. There were words scratched out, but two lines were still visible. Subject trained in advanced close-quarters combat. Mental conditioning classified. Do not engage without authorization. Daniels stared at it, realizing too late that the man everyone called Rookie was something else entirely. The next morning, the prison buzzed with tension. The cages were being cleaned. The spectators were whispering. And far away in his small cell, Elias folded his uniform neatly, sensing the change in the air. He knew what was coming. He could feel it, the weight of hostility pressing against the walls. He tied the strings of his prison shirt slowly, the way soldiers once tied their gear before battle. Then he looked out through the bars, his eyes distant, calm, and ready. Because Elias Ward didn't fear another fight. He feared what would happen when he stopped holding back. The days leading up to the next fight felt different. Something unseen had shifted inside Redwater Federal Penitentiary, like the air itself was holding its breath. Conversation stopped when Elias walked by. Even the guards spoke in whispers. Everyone knew something was coming, and for once it wasn't just another cage fight. Viper and Razor had made their move. Through backdoor deals and quiet exchanges, they reached the guards who controlled the den. A few cartons of cigarettes, a handful of cash, and one promise of silence. That's all it took to set up the rematch. This time, the cage would be different. Hidden blades welded under the mats. A pipe loose enough to break off and be used as a weapon. lights that could be cut to create chaos. The fight wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about revenge. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels couldn't shake what he'd read in that file. The words haunted him. Do not engage. He tried to forget it, but every time he saw Elias in the corridor, he felt it again. That unspoken gravity, that strange stillness that wasn't just discipline. One afternoon, he found Elias sitting alone in the laundry room fixing a broken button on his uniform. Daniels hesitated, then spoke quietly. You were military, weren't you? Elias didn't look up. That part of my life ended a long time ago. Not according to your file, Daniels said, testing him. Elias paused, his hands still. Then you've seen more than you should have. There was no threat in his voice, just a warning wrapped in calm certainty. Daniels swallowed hard. He wanted to ask more, but something in Elias's eyes told him not to. It wasn't fear that stopped him. It was respect. Elsewhere in the prison, alliances began to fracture. The Iron Vultures, the gang that once backed Viper, started questioning his leadership. They'd seen what Elias did, and deep down, they knew power was shifting. Their leader, Marco Vega, was a calculating man. He believed survival came not from loyalty, but from adapting fast. He approached Elias in the yard one afternoon. Word is you're a man who doesn't like unnecessary noise, Vega said, walking beside him. I prefer quiet, Elias replied without looking at him. Quiet men are dangerous, Vega smiled. They think before they strike. I don't strike unless I have to. That's what makes you different, Vega said, his tone sharpening. And that's why Viper wants you gone. Elias stopped walking. Let him come. Vega's smile faded. He won't come alone. That night, while the inmates played cards and traded stories, Vega called his closest men. If the rookie falls, he said, Redwater belongs to chaos again. But if he stands, maybe we can build something better. It wasn't loyalty to Elias. It was strategy. Because in Redwater, even respect could be weaponized. The tension built like a ticking clock. The yard became quieter. The fights fewer. Everyone was saving their energy for what was about to happen. Even those who hated Elias couldn't help but admire the balance he carried. He wasn't like them. He didn't crave dominance or validation. He simply existed in control, and that made men like Viper lose sleep. In the corner of the mess hall, Razor watched him eat in silence. The humiliation still burned inside him, festering into obsession. He's not unbeatable, he muttered. He bleeds like anyone else. Viper didn't respond. His fists were clenched, knuckles white, veins pulsing. Then we'll make him bleed, he said, in the dark. Unbeknownst to them, Daniels had already warned the warden that something was brewing. You should cancel the next cage match, he said. It's going to turn ugly. The warden just smirked. You think I don't know? Let them fight. Sometimes order needs a little destruction to reset itself. Daniels left his office furious, realizing Redwater wasn't just a prison. It was an experiment, and Elias, willing or not, was at the center of it. Later that night, in his cell, Elias sat awake while the rain hammered against the walls. He could feel it, the weight of eyes watching, the slow build of violence circling him like vultures. He had seen this pattern before, in war zones, in missions that never made the news. Every move, every whisper, every look, all pointing to one thing, a storm about to break. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He didn't fear it. He was born in it. The storm finally arrived. It began on a Friday evening just after roll call. The sky above Redwater Federal Penitentiary was the color of old steel, and thunder growled in the distance like an omen. The guards' radios crackled with static, and everyone inside felt that strange, electric tension that comes before chaos. Word spread fast. There would be another fight in the den. No names, no schedule, just whispers. But everyone knew who it was for. By nightfall, the cage was surrounded. Dozens of inmates pressed against the fences, shouting, betting, lighting up smuggled cigarettes. Even the guards looked eager. Everyone wanted to see if the hidden master would bleed. Elias Ward walked into the yard without expression. He wasn't forced. He volunteered. Maybe because he knew running wasn't an option, or maybe because some battles aren't meant to be avoided. As he stepped inside the den, the noise died down. replaced by that eerie quiet only true danger brings. Across from him, Viper Maddox and Razor Lee waited, both shirtless, both scarred, both ready. But this time, they weren't alone. Two more men from Viper's gang had joined, standing like shadows on either side of the cage. Elias looked around slowly. The mat under his feet felt uneven. His eyes caught the faint glint of metal beneath the surface. A trap. He knew it instantly. Viper grinned. "You didn't think we'd fight fair twice, did you?" Elias said nothing. He simply rolled his shoulders and exhaled. Calm, deliberate, centered. The bell rang. Razor came first, swinging wildly, his rage overpowering his form. Elias dodged effortlessly, his movements clean and surgical. A single step, a turn, a strike. Razor's nose shattered. He dropped instantly, hands covering his face, blood spilling through his fingers. Then came the two new men, charging together. Elias spun, grabbing the first by the collar and using his own momentum to flip him into the cage wall. The second lunged with a piece of pipe he'd ripped loose from the corner. Elias ducked, the metal slicing the air inches from his face. He swept the man's legs, sending him crashing backward onto the ground. It was a blur. Every movement measured, efficient, unstoppable. He wasn't fighting to survive anymore. He was demonstrating something else. Control, mastery, balance. But then Viper struck. He had waited for the opening. A heavy punch to the ribs followed by another to the jaw. Elias staggered, the first real hit he had taken since entering Redwater. The crowd roared. Viper pressed on, his attacks brutal, relentless. He slammed Elias into the cage wall, metal vibrating from the impact. For a moment, it looked like the king was reclaiming his crown. Then Viper made a mistake. He went for the same move he always used, a downward elbow aimed at the neck. Predictable, telegraphed, and Elias, calm even through the pain, saw it coming. He caught the arm mid-swing, twisted it outward, and in one precise motion, locked Viper's body into a hold that froze the entire yard. 1 second later, a sharp crack echoed through the den. Viper collapsed, screaming, his arm broken. The guards flinched. The inmates went silent. The storm outside broke open, rain slamming against the concrete as lightning lit the cage in white flashes. Elias didn't move. He stood over Viper, breathing evenly, water running down his face. His voice was quiet, but it carried over the storm. "You built your power on fear. That's why it never lasted." He turned away and started walking toward the gate. But before he could leave, Razor, half-conscious, bloodied, reached for the hidden pipe again. He swung it upward, desperate, blind with rage. Without turning, Elias sidestepped and struck once. Open palm. Clean. Final. Razor fell like a marionette with its strings cut. The fight was over. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. No one dared to speak. Even the guards froze, unsure whether to intervene or bow their heads. The warden, watching from his office window above the yard, simply whispered, "So it's true." Because what they had witnessed wasn't a fight. It was revelation. That beneath the label of inmate, beneath the uniform and chains, stood a man shaped by discipline no prison could contain. When Elias finally stepped out of the cage, Daniels was waiting by the gate, soaked in rain. Their eyes met. "You could have killed them," Daniel said. Elias shook his head. That's what they expected. He walked past him, quiet and steady, disappearing into the corridors as thunder rolled above. Behind him, the yard stayed silent, not out of fear this time, but respect. And in Redwater Penitentiary, that silence meant everything. The morning after the storm, Redwater didn't wake up. It recovered. Rain still dripped through cracks in the ceiling, washing streaks of blood into the drains. The cage stood empty now, twisted and bent like a relic from some forgotten war. No one spoke about what happened. No one had to. The walls themselves seemed to hum with the memory of it. Cole Viper Maddox was taken to the infirmary before sunrise. His arm was shattered in 2 places, his pride in 1,000. The man who once ruled Redwater lay in silence, staring at the ceiling, refusing painkillers, refusing to speak. Every breath was a reminder of the sound, that single, clean snap that ended his reign. Razor, his partner in cruelty, didn't fare better. His jaw was wired shut, his ribs cracked. He hadn't spoken a word since the fight. The guard said he looked lost. The kind of loss that doesn't heal. But the rest of the prison, that was different. In the mess hall, whispers filled the air like wildfire. He took on 4 guys. Didn't even break a sweat. They say he was trained by the military. No, another interrupted. The government tried to erase him. That's why he's here. Rumors mutated into myth. Every inmate added something new. That Elias fought in secret wars, that he killed with his bare hands, that he was sent to Redwater as punishment for knowing too much. Truth didn't matter anymore. Elias Ward had become something bigger than a man. He'd become legend. Officer Daniels saw it coming. He watched from the control room as inmates stepped aside when Elias walked through the corridors. No one dared to touch him. No one dared to even speak. It wasn't fear anymore. It was reverence, the kind that can't be taught or forced. But Daniels also saw the danger in it. Power, even when earned, attracts envy. And envy breeds chaos. In the warden's office, the discussion was short and cold. This man, the warden said, tapping the report on his desk, has become a symbol. That's bad for business. Daniels frowned. He stopped the violence. You should thank him. The warden leaned back in his chair. There's no peace in a place like this, Daniels. There's only control, and right now he has more of it than we do. What are you saying? I'm saying keep an eye on him. Men like that don't belong in cages. They build them. Meanwhile, inside his cell, Elias sat cross-legged on the floor, his breathing slow and steady. The rain outside had stopped, and the morning light cut through the bars like a blade. His knuckles were bruised, his lips split, but his mind was still calm. He wasn't proud of what he'd done. Pride wasn't part of his nature. He had defended himself, nothing more. But something deep inside him whispered that it wasn't over. When Daniels passed his cell later that day, he stopped. You changed this place, he said quietly. Elias didn't open his eyes. No, Redwater changed itself. I just showed it a mirror. Daniels nodded slowly. You know they'll come for you again. Elias opened his eyes then, calm, unshaken. They already are. And he was right. That evening, while the prisoners lined up for dinner, a small group from another block watched Elias from afar. They weren't part of Viper's gang. They were worse. Men with nothing to lose, waiting for a chance to rise. To them, defeating Elias meant power, fame, freedom within the cage. The hierarchy had fallen, and the throne was empty. But Redwater had changed. The guards felt it in the air. Less shouting, fewer fights, but more silence. The dangerous kind. The kind that happens when everyone's waiting for something big. It wasn't peace, it was pressure. And everyone knew that pressure only ends one way. With an explosion. That night, as the lights went out and the sirens faded into the hum of the generators, Elias stood by the window of his cell, watching the faint lightning on the horizon. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered. A man caught between peace and punishment. Somewhere deep inside the prison, metal creaked. A door opened that shouldn't have. Footsteps echoed down the hall, and Elias Ward closed his eyes. He didn't need to see. He could feel it. The storm was returning. Redwater had always been a cage built for broken men. But after the storm, something shifted. Not in the walls, but in the people trapped behind them. The silence that once belonged to fear now carried something else. Order. And the one man responsible for it didn't even ask for it. Elias Ward became the unspoken center of that fragile balance. He never called himself a leader. He never demanded loyalty. Yet men who once ruled with fists began to listen when he spoke. Even the most violent inmates, men with blood on their hands and hate in their hearts, seemed to stop when Elias simply raised a hand. To them, he was proof that control could be stronger than chaos. To Elias, it was a burden he never wanted. He spent his days working quietly in the laundry, refusing special treatment. He fixed torn uniforms, mended buttons, and kept to himself. But around him, Redwater began to change. Fights in the yard became rare. Disputes were settled with words, not blood. The guards noticed. Daniels noticed most of all. One afternoon, Daniels found him sitting in the sun near the far wall of the yard. "You could have everything here," Daniels said. "The inmates respect you more than they respect the warden." Elias kept his gaze on the horizon. "Respect isn't ownership. You know what I mean. You've built something stable. You could use that." Elias shook his head. "I didn't build it. They did. They just needed to be reminded of who they were before the cage." Daniels studied him. "Who were you before yours?" Elias's jaw tightened. "Someone who believed violence could fix broken systems. And now? Now I know violence only resets them." That night, lying on his bunk, Elias thought about those words. He had come to Redwater believing it was a punishment, but the longer he stayed, the more it felt like something else. A test, not of strength, but of restraint. Every day without a fight was a victory that no one could see. He had faced armies, enemies, and death. But this, mastering the urge to destroy what provoked him, this was harder. Still, peace never lasts in places like Redwater. The balance he unintentionally created began to attract new predators. In Block D, a new group was rising, the Hounds, led by a man named Travis Cole. Younger, ruthless, and hungry for power, Cole wasn't like Viper. He didn't rely on brute strength. He relied on manipulation. He watched Elias carefully, learning his patterns, his influence, his weakness. "Every man has a limit," Cole told his crew. "The quiet ones. They break the loudest when it matters." And while the Hounds plotted, Daniels fought his own war. He had received orders from above: move Elias to another facility. Transfer for behavioral evaluation, the papers said. But he knew the truth. Someone higher up didn't like the idea of a prisoner commanding that much respect. He tried to argue. The warden wouldn't listen. "Ward's a ghost," the warden said. "We don't keep ghosts around long." Daniels made a choice. If Elias was leaving Redwater, it wouldn't be quietly. Meanwhile, Elias began noticing small changes. Missing books from the library, cold stares from new guards, whispers behind closed doors. He wasn't paranoid. He'd lived too long in the shadows not to recognize when eyes started tracking him. Something was coming again. Not a fight in the cage. Something worse. One night, as he meditated in his cell, a folded note slid under his door. It read only one word: transfer. He stared at it for a long time, then burned it over the small metal sink until it turned to ash. When Daniels came by later, Elias was calm as ever. "They're moving you," Daniels said quietly. "I know. You could resist. 'Cause a scene. Make them delay it." Elias looked at him. "That's what they want. Proof that I'm still what they think I am. Then what are you?" Elias smiled faintly. "Someone they can't define." The next day, the warden received word that Elias would be transferred within 72 hours. But as the news spread, something unexpected happened. The inmates refused to accept it. The ones he had once fought, once humbled, once guided, they began to rise. Not with weapons, but with unity. Men from rival gangs stood shoulder to shoulder. "Ward doesn't leave," one shouted in the yard. "He kept us alive." The guards ordered silence. No one obeyed. For the first time, Redwater wasn't divided by race, gang, or rank. It stood as one voice, quiet but unbreakable. From his cell, Elias heard the noise echoing through the corridors. He closed his eyes, realizing something profound. He hadn't just survived Redwater. He had changed it. Not with fear, not with force, but with discipline. He understood now why he was sent there. Not to be destroyed, but to rebuild what everyone else had given up on. And yet deep inside, a quiet certainty remained. The storm wasn't finished. It was just waiting for a new form. The tension in Redwater Federal Penitentiary could be felt in the air. Thick, electric, impossible to ignore. Everyone knew something was about to happen, but no one knew what. 3 days after the announcement of Elias Ward's transfer, the prison was no longer functioning like a prison. The usual rhythm, the sirens, the meals, the monotony, was broken. Guards whispered in corners. Inmates avoided eye contact. Even the yard, once full of noise and chaos, had fallen eerily quiet. Something was building beneath the surface. Officer Daniels had stopped sleeping. He'd spent every night replaying the same thought. Why here? Why now? The transfer order had come from higher up, not from the warden, not from state corrections. It bore a seal he didn't recognize, one that didn't belong to any department he knew. He had seen something like it once years ago on a military intelligence file, the same kind of file that mentioned Project Dominion. When he looked deeper, he found nothing, as if the system erased itself whenever he tried to access it. But there was one detail he couldn't unsee: a date. The date matched Elias Ward's arrest. Daniels understood then that Elias's imprisonment wasn't a coincidence. It was containment. Meanwhile, the warden prepared for the transfer with unnerving calm. "Midnight," he told the guards. "No announcements, no lights, minimal resistance." But resistance was already brewing. The inmates had formed something unseen before: unity. They weren't planning a riot. They were planning protection. Elias had become their quiet symbol of strength, and they weren't going to let him be taken without answers. Small messages passed between cells, scrawled on paper scraps and hidden under food trays. One phrase kept repeating: "The master doesn't leave." Elias, however, remained motionless. He continued his quiet routine, the same breathing exercises, the same calm focus. Yet his eyes told a different story. They weren't tired, they were calculating. He knew something no one else did. That evening, Daniels approached his cell, heart pounding. "They're moving you tonight," he said. Elias looked up from his cot, eyes calm. "I know. You can't just let them. It's already in motion." Daniels frowned. "What is?" Elias stood slowly, walking to the bars. "Do you know what Redwater was before it became a prison?" "No. It was a training facility, Cold War era, a place where they broke soldiers and rebuilt them into something else." Daniels blinked. "And you were one of them." Elias's voice dropped to a whisper. "The last one who survived." Before Daniels could reply, the alarms flickered. Not the usual siren, something deeper, mechanical. The lights dimmed, then pulsed back to life. A storm rumbled outside, thunder rolling across the mountains like artillery fire. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the signal. Outside the cell blocks, the guards moved in formation. Too disciplined, too efficient for a normal transfer. They weren't Redwater staff. Their uniforms were unmarked. Their rifles, suppressed. This wasn't a relocation. It was an extraction. Daniels realized it first. "They're not moving you," he whispered. "They're erasing you." Elias looked calm, almost serene. "Then it's time they remember what they tried to bury." The power suddenly cut out. The prison plunged into darkness. Shouts echoed down the halls, followed by gunfire. Not warning shots, but execution bursts. Inmates ducked behind bunks as chaos erupted. The storm outside roared louder, lightning flashing through the narrow windows, revealing shadows moving through the corridors. In the confusion, one of the metal doors blew open. Elias stepped out, his chains broken, not by strength but by precision. Every movement was fluid, deliberate. He wasn't running for freedom. He was moving with purpose, like a man walking through a storm he'd seen before. Daniels followed him through the smoke and noise. "What are you doing?" Elias didn't turn back. Finishing what they started. By now, the other inmates had joined the chaos, not as rioters, but as distractions. They weren't fighting each other anymore. They were shielding something, shielding him. Elias moved through the corridors like a ghost, unarmed, but unstoppable. Every instinct, every piece of training that the government had tried to bury, came alive again. When they reached the main gate, the wind howled through the broken fences. Redwater burned behind them, alarms blaring, lights flashing in the storm. Daniels stopped, breathless. "If you walk out there, you'll vanish." Elias looked at him, calm and certain. "That's the point." Lightning lit his face for a single instant, and then he was gone. No one ever saw him leave. But from that night on, every man in Redwater swore they heard his footsteps whenever silence fell too long. The storm over Redwater didn't end when Elias Ward disappeared into the darkness. It only changed shape. By dawn, the prison was burning. Smoke rose from the mountains like a black flag, visible for miles. The official report would call it a riot, another outbreak of violence in a forgotten facility. But those who were there knew better. It wasn't chaos. It was a reckoning. Hours later, miles away from Redwater, An unmarked convoy sped down a deserted highway. Inside one of the armored trucks sat 3 men in suits, military but without insignia. Between them was a file labeled Ward E. Termination Order. "Command wants confirmation," one of them said into the radio. "Target extracted?" A cold voice replied, "Negative. He's gone." The man cursed under his breath. "That's impossible. The perimeter was built by him," the voice interrupted. "You really thought you could cage your own creation?" Silence filled the truck. Then from outside came the sound of metal, something scraping against the roof. The driver looked up, eyes wide. What the hell was that? Before anyone could answer, the roof caved in with a thunderous crash. Elias dropped in like a shadow from the storm, his movements fast, fluid, surgical. 2 men reached for their weapons. Too slow. In less than 5 seconds, both were disarmed, one unconscious, the other gasping for air. The third man froze, his trembling hands raised. "Ward, please." Elias grabbed the file from the seat, flipped it open, and scanned the first page. There it was. The seal. The same one that had haunted Daniel's nightmares. Project Dominion, Psychological and Combat Conditioning Initiative. Underneath, Subject 01, Elias Ward. Status, terminated. He looked at the man. "Who gave the order?" The man stuttered. "It's above me. I don't—" Elias slammed him against the wall. "Names?" "General Keene, Washington Division. They said you were unstable, dangerous. You were supposed to die in Redwater." Elias's voice turned to steel. "They built me for war, then buried me for peace." He released the man, who collapsed to the floor. Then, without another word, Elias stepped out of the truck and vanished into the rain-soaked highway. In Washington, General Marcus Keene sat in his office, staring at a secure monitor. The feed showed Redwater still burning. "You lost him," said the voice on the other end. Keene's jaw tightened. "He's not a man. He's an algorithm in flesh. Sooner or later he'll come to me." "And if he does?" Keene smiled faintly. Then the program worked. But Elias was already there. Hours later, long after midnight, the alarms in the Pentagon's East Wing went silent. Cameras cut out one by one. A shadow moved through the corridors, unseen and unstoppable. Elias had followed the trail, the trucks, the false records, the soldiers who had never existed. It all led here, and at the end of it was Keene. He found him alone in his office, surrounded by classified files and a half-empty glass of whiskey. The general didn't even flinch when the door opened. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Keene said, turning slowly. "I see you've kept your training sharp." Elias stepped forward. "You turned men into weapons and called it salvation." Keene shrugged. "The world needed control. You were proof it worked, until you started thinking for yourself." Elias's voice was low but steady. "You didn't want control. You wanted gods." "Maybe," Keene said. "And what does that make you?" Elias stared at him. "The mistake you couldn't erase." The general reached for the gun on his desk, but by the time his fingers touched it, Elias had already disassembled it in a single, silent motion. "You're not here to kill me," Keene said. "If you were, I'd already be dead." "You're right," Elias replied. "I'm not here for revenge." "Then why?" "To end it." Elias opened the folder in his hand and placed it on the desk. Inside were the names of every operative, every experiment, every location tied to Project Dominion. Keene's eyes widened. "How did you—" "I remembered what you wanted me to forget." Then, for the first time, Elias smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. He turned to leave, his silhouette framed by the lightning outside. "You think this ends with me walking away?" Keene shouted after him. Elias stopped at the door. "No. It ends when you finally face what you created." He left the building as sirens erupted across the city. Behind him, the monitors began to flicker, one by one, each showing the same image. A red stamp reading, "Project Dominion, declassified." By dawn, the news broke across every major network. Anonymous files leaked online, documents exposing secret human enhancement programs and experiments that had been buried for decades. No one knew who released them. No one ever saw Elias again. But some swore they caught glimpses of him. A man walking alone along the edge of the desert, disappearing into the fog. For the first time in years, Elias Ward wasn't running from his past. He had finally outrun it. The world changed quietly. No explosions, no speeches, no victory parades, just silence, the kind that follows when a lie finally dies. The government denied everything, of course. They called the documents fabricated, the project fiction. But truth has a way of surviving denial. Within weeks, the story spread across the world. Soldiers began asking questions, journalists dug deeper, and names once buried in classified archives began to resurface. Project Dominion had become a ghost they could no longer control. As for Redwater, it never reopened. What was left of the prison was consumed by the fire that night. The official report blamed faulty wiring, but everyone who had lived inside those walls knew the truth. The system collapsed from within, and the inmates, those broken men society had forgotten, were transferred or released. Yet something strange happened. None of them spoke of revenge. They spoke of him, of the man who fought not to win, but to awaken. Officer Daniels left the force months later. He couldn't unsee what he had witnessed. Not just the violence, but the transformation. He often drove past the ruins of Redwater, parking by the scorched gate. Sometimes, when the wind was right, he swore he could still hear footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Discipline, he would whisper to himself. That's what saved us. Rumors continued. In a small village near the Arizona border, an old mechanic claimed a man stopped by one night, quiet, calm, asking for water and a map. He had the eyes of a soldier, the man said, but the peace of a monk. Others told stories of a stranger helping rebuild homes after a hurricane, or protecting travelers from a roadside ambush. No one could prove any of it. But every story ended the same way. He came in silence, and he left without a trace. Elias Ward had become what they could never manufacture, a man who found freedom not in destruction, but in self-control. He had learned that real power wasn't in breaking others, but in mastering himself. And somewhere out there, far beyond the headlines and ruins, he walked alone under a gray sky, hands steady, steps measured, not as a weapon, not as a myth, but as a man finally at peace with his own creation. Because Redwater didn't destroy him, it revealed him. Months later, satellite images showed nothing but dust where Redwater once stood, as if the earth itself had chosen to erase its memory. But legends don't vanish, they evolve. Some say Elias Ward still walks the forgotten roads, helping strangers, guiding the lost. Others believe he became something even greater, a whisper of balance in a world built on chaos. No one knows where he is, but everyone who hears his story feels the same truth. The quietest man in the room is often the one who could end it all. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Hit like to support more powerful tales like this one, and subscribe to the channel for new stories every week. Comment below. Silence hides strength. Your words help this story reach others who need to hear it. And remember, strength isn't always loud, and victory isn't always seen. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought in silence, and the strongest heroes are the ones who never seek to be known.